The structural funds and the Cohesion Fund are financial tools set up to implement the regional policy of the European Union. They aim to reduce regional disparities in income, wealth and opportunities. Europe's poorer regions receive most of the support, but all European regions are eligible for funding under the policy's various funds and programs. The current regional policy framework is set for a period of 7 years, from 2014 to 2020. The structural funds are made up of the European Regional Development Fund and the European Social Fund. Together with the Common Agricultural Policy, the structural funds and the Cohesion Fund make up the great bulk of EU funding, and the majority of total EU spending. Apart from funds under the cohesion policy, there are other funds that have the potential to contribute to the regional development. These are, funds under the CAP, namely the European Agricultural Guarantee Fund and the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development, the European Fisheries Fund established for the programming period 2007-2013 with the Council Regulation No. 1198/2006 of July 27, 2006. The structural funds and the Cohesion Fund make up one of the largest items of the budget of the European Union. It is up to the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union to define the tasks, priority objectives and the organisation of the structural funds, through the ordinary legislative procedure and consulting the Economic and Social Committee and the Committee of the Regions. Sections below present information about objectives that have been defined for the current programming period, which runs from January 1, 2007 to December 31, 2013. The overall budget for this period is a 347 BN, a 201 BN for the European Regional Development Fund, a 76 BN for the European Social Fund, and a 70 BN for the Cohesion Fund. The objective setup shapes the main focus of interventions and the overall allocations of funds from the EU budget. The key indicator for the division of regions under singular objectives is the gross national product per capita level. This is subject to criticism based on the fact that GDP/PC is unable to reflect the real socio-economic reality of regions. Some groups and organizations propose the creation of a set of alternative indicators that could substitute the GDP and its derivatives. Objectives for 2007 are (2013). Convergence objective equals. This objective covers regions whose GDP per capita is below 75% of the EU average and aims at accelerating their economic development. It is financed by the ERDF, the ESF and the Cohesion Fund. The priorities under this objective are human and physical capital, innovation, knowledge society, environment and administrative efficiency. The budget allocated to this objective is a 283.3 BN in current prices. Regional competitiveness and employment objective equals. This objective covers all regions of the EU territory, except those already covered by the convergence objective. It aims at reinforcing competitiveness, employment and attractiveness of these regions. Innovation, the promotion of entrepreneurship and environment protection are the main themes of this objective. The funding a 55 BN in current prices a comes from the ERDF and the ESF. European Territorial Cooperation objective equals. European Territorial Cooperation is an objective of the European Union a unregistered trademark cohesion policy for the period 2007 2013, serving its ultimate goal to strengthen the economic and social cohesion of the Union. Regions and cities from different member states are encouraged to work together, learning from each other and developing joint projects and networks. With the convergence objective and the regional competitiveness and employment objective, it aims at contributing to reduce regional disparities across Union's territory. The 8.7 billion European euros allocated to the European Territorial Cooperation objective represents 2.5% of the total budget for cohesion policy in 2007 2013 and is financed by the European Regional Development Fund. It supports cross-border, transnational and interregional cooperation programs, helping member states to participate in European Union external border cooperation programs supported by other instruments. History. The European Territorial Cooperation Objective replaced the previous Interreg Community Initiative, and thus many European territorial cooperation programs bear the name Interreg. The objectives were introduced with the Single European Act as a criterion to make the structural funds spending more effective as regional policies started to be rationalized in a perspective of economic and social cohesion. The Single European Act, that entered into force in 1987, institutionalized the goal of completing the internal market with the total borders opening, by December 31, 1992. Regional competition would be tighter and a cohesion policy was needed to mitigate the negative side effects of market unification. The objectives were then created to discipline the capture of funds in terms of economic and social cohesion across the Union's territory. In the first multi-annual financial framework, 1988 to Euro 1999, there were 7 objectives, which have been progressively reduced. Even though European Territorial Cooperation Objective is the smallest of the 3 cohesion policy objectives, it gained a critical importance to address the key challenges of the European Union, particularly with some redefinitions of the Treaty of Lisbon, and for contributing to achieve the goals of Europe 2020, the EU's growth strategy. Institutional and legal framework. In its title on economic, social and territorial cohesion, the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union establishes that the Union shall develop and pursue its actions leading to the strengthening of its economic, social and territorial cohesion, a Euro unregistered trademark. By introducing the concept of territorial cohesion, the Treaty of Lisbon recognized a strong territorial dimension for the cohesion policy. This territorial approach requires a unique and modern governance system, combining different levels of government. Member states thus conduct their economic policies and coordinate them for the promotion of the Euro economic, social and territorial cohesion, a Euro unregistered trademark. European territorial cooperation is a component of the economic policy framework of the Union. The current regional policy framework, sustained by structural funds, is set for a period of 7 years, from 2007 to 2013. For this period, the following regulations are especially important in defining the organization of European territorial cooperation. Regulation No. 10/80/2006 of the European Parliament and of the Council of July 5, 2006 on the European Regional Development Fund and repealing Regulation No. 1783/1999. Council Regulation No. 1083/2006 of July 11, 2006 laying down general provisions on the European Regional Development Fund, the European Social Fund and the Cohesion Fund and repealing Regulation No. 1260/1999. Commission Regulation No. 1828/2006 of December 8, 2006, setting out rules for the implementation of Council Regulation No. 1083/2006, laying down general provisions on the European Regional Development Fund, the European Social Fund and the Cohesion Fund and of Regulation No. 1080/2006 of the European Parliament and of the Council on the European Regional Development Fund. The European Territorial Cooperation Objective is financed by the European Regional Development Fund, whereas the remaining 2 objectives of the cohesion policy set for the 2007-2013 period are also financed by the European Social Fund, and, in the case with the convergence objective, also the Cohesion Fund. Organization. As with the remaining 2 objectives, the European Territorial Cooperation Objective is delivered by means of multi-annual programs aligned on the Union, a Euro unregistered trademark S objectives and priorities, expressed on the multi-annual financial framework. Each program has a managing authority and a joint technical secretariat, headquartered within the area it serves. They are responsible for the correct implementation of the program, both from a financial and from an operational perspective. Within European territorial cooperation, there are 3 types of programs: cross-border cooperation. These programs help transform regions located on either side of internal or external borders of the European Union into strong economic and social poles. The main goals of these programs are to face common problems and mitigate the negative effects of administrative, legal and physical barriers of borders. the cooperation process is stressed through joint management of programs and projects that stimulate mutual trust and understanding. In particular, cross-border actions are encouraged in the fields of entrepreneurship, improving joint management of natural resources, supporting links between urban and rural areas, improving access to transport and communication networks, developing joint use of infrastructure, administrative cooperation and capacity building, employment, community interaction, culture and social affairs. Transnational cooperation. The transnational programs promote cooperation among greater European regions, including the ones surrounding sea basins or mountain ranges, and facilitate coordinated strategic responses to joint challenges, such as flood management, transport and communication corridors, international business and research linkages, urban development and others. Special attention is given to outermost and island regions. The Interregional Cooperation Programme and 3 networking programs cover all 27 member states of the Union. Together and in their specific fields, these programs provide a framework for exchanging experience between regional and local bodies in different countries. The Instrument for Pre-Accession and the European Neighbourhood Policy Instrument are the 2 financial instruments dedicated to support territorial cooperation between European member states' border regions and their neighbours in accession countries and in other partner countries of the Union. The former currently finances 10 programmes and the latter 13 programmes. The funds equals the European Regional Development Fund equals the ERDF supports programs addressing regional development, economic change, enhanced competitiveness and territorial cooperation throughout the EU. Funding priorities include modernizing economic structures, creating sustainable jobs and economic growth, research and innovation, environmental protection and risk prevention. Investment in infrastructure also retains an important role, especially in the least developed regions. Equals the European Social Fund equals, the ESF focuses on 4 key areas, increasing the adaptability of workers and enterprises, enhancing access to employment and participation in the labour market, reinforcing social inclusion by combating discrimination and facilitating access to the labour market for disadvantaged people, and promoting partnership for reform in the fields of employment and inclusion. Equals the Cohesion Fund equals, the Cohesion Fund contributes to interventions in the field of the environment and trans-European transport networks. It applies to member states with a gross national income of less than 90% of the EU average. As such, it covers all 12 new member states as well as Greece and Portugal. Spain is also eligible for the Cohesion Fund, but on a transitional basis. A new strategic approach. This section explains the interplay between different political levels Euro-European, national and regional Euro in determining the priorities for the structural funds and the guidelines for implementing regional projects. In general, the overarching priorities for the structural funds are set at the EU level and then transformed into national priorities by the member states and regions. At the EU level, the overarching priorities are established in the Community Strategic Guidelines. These set the framework for all actions that can be taken using the funds. Within this framework, each member state develops its own national strategic reference framework. The NSRF sets out the priorities for the respective member state, taking specific national policies into account. Finally, operational programs for each region within the member state are drawn up in accordance with the respective NSRF, reflecting the needs of individual regions. EU level, Community Strategic Guidelines, national level, National Strategic Reference Framework for each member state, regional level, operational program for each region. Equals Community Strategic Guidelines equals, the Community Strategic Guidelines contain the principles and priorities of the EU's cohesion policy and suggest ways the European regions can take full advantage of the funding that has been made available for national and regional aid programs for the period 2007–2013. There are 3 priorities: improving the attractiveness of member states, regions and cities by improving accessibility, ensuring adequate quality and level of services, and preserving their environmental potential. Encouraging innovation, entrepreneurship and the growth of the knowledge economy by supporting research and innovation capacities, including new information and communication technologies. Creating more and better jobs by attracting more people into employment, entrepreneurial activity, improving adaptability of workers and enterprises and increasing investment in human capital. National Strategic Reference Framework A National Strategic Reference Framework establishes the main priorities for spending the EU structural funding a member state receives between 2007 and 2013. Each member state has its own NSRF. Adopting an NSRF is a new requirement of the Structural Funds regulations for 2007 to 2013. Each NSRF functions as a high-level strategy for the operational programs in the respective member state. The document provides an overview of the economic strengths and weaknesses of the member states' regions, and sets out the approach to future structural funds spending across the member state. Operational programs An operational program sets out a region's priorities for delivering the funds. Although there is scope for regional flexibility, a region's priorities must be consistent with the member state's NSRF. There is an operational program for each region in the EU. These OPs, just like the NSRF, have to be approved by the European Commission before any implementation. Funds management. Although the structural funds are part of the EU budget, the way they are spent is based on a system of shared responsibility between the European Commission and the member state authorities. The Commission negotiates and approves the NSRFs and OPs proposed by the member states, and uses these as a basis for allocating resources. The member states in their regions manage the programs. This includes implementing the OPs by selecting individual projects, controlling and assessing them. The Commission is involved in overall program monitoring, pays out approved expenditure and verifies the national control systems. New architecture for 2014-2020. The European Commission has adopted a draft legislative package which will frame cohesion policy for 2014 to 2020. The new proposals are designed to reinforce the strategic dimension of the policy and to ensure that EU investment is targeted on Europe's long-term goals for growth and jobs. Through partnership contracts agreed with the Commission, member states will commit to focusing on fewer investment priorities in line with these objectives. The package also harmonizes the rules related to different funds, including rural development and maritime and fisheries, to increase the coherence of EU action. See also, Budget of the European Union, Committee of the Regions, Council of the European Union, Economic and Social Committee, European Legislative Procedure, European Investment Bank, European Union Regional Policy, ERDF, ESF, European Grouping for Territorial Cooperation, European Parliament, Interreg, Treaty of Lisbon, Single European Act. References. General, EU Lex EU, consolidated versions of the Treaty on European Union and the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. Interact-EU.net, Cohesion 2007 Euro 2013 Policy Framework. Interact-EU.net, Cohesion Policy, 2007 Euro 2013 Regulatory Framework. Directorate General for Regional Policy, 3 Objectives. Directorate General for Regional Policy, European Territorial Cooperation. Directorate General for Regional Policy, Cross-Border Cooperation Programs. Directorate General for Regional Policy, Interregional Cooperation. Directorate General for Regional Policy, Structural Funds Regulations 2007 Euro 2013. Single Market Euro Communication from the European Commission, http, Europa Institutional Affairs Treaties Singly Act NHTM. External links, European Commission, Community Strategic Guidelines 2007 Euro 2013, Operational Programs for all European regions, Outcomes of European Territorial Cooperation, European Territorial Cooperation, Building Bridges Between People, Searchable Database of European Territorial Cooperation Programs, Projects, Partners and Statistics, Directorate General for Regional Policy, Interact, 1.